Now I am going to show you an interview question where in the related to retry, which can be very important and can be asked in senior level interview. So if you remember in the retry video what we had done, we had this fallback method in retry also and also in service payment service also. Okay, so there are different cases, like if fallback method is written at circuit breaker level, like with this annotation of circuit breaker, then what will happen, how fallback is called, and if retry would get triggered or not, right? And what would happen if it is a normal scenario like we have written it with retry, and where we should write the fallback method, whether whether we should write fallback method with retry or circuit breaker, what is the standard practice, we are going to understand that. Okay, so this is very important, that's why I wanted to show you so that we can understand. So let me show you. I asked ChatGPT this question, like explain me whether retry will be triggered or not in below scenarios if fallback is triggered and dummy response is sent back. Okay, if fallback is triggered and dummy response is sent back, if fallback method is triggered but I intentionally throw exception in fallback method. So if you remember, I was throwing exception here only, just like throw new exception. Here is EX. Okay, so what would happen in this scenario? So you can see it is expecting to throw the exception also. Unreachable, just need to comment out. So what would happen in this scenario also if a fallback is failing, right? So we covered normal scenario, then abnormal scenario. So now let's see what happens. Okay, what are the different scenarios? So I asked the same question and I gave our class, entire class. Here you can see fallback method is at retry level and not circuit breaker level. Okay, so let's see the interesting scenarios. Here you can see this is exactly where most people get confused with Resilience4j annotation chaining. Let's break it down cleanly because on how Spring AOP actually executes this annotation, how cleanly based. Okay, so first execution, understand the execution order. When you write at the rate retry something, then fallback method, then at the rate circuit breaker, then what happens, execution order is outer to inner. Okay, from retry to circuit breaker. So here you can see retry to circuit breaker, then actual method is triggered. If actual method fails, then fallback is triggered. Cool. If fallback is failing, then we will see what would happen. So you can see flow becomes retry, the circuit breaker, then get payment. So this is the normal flow. Okay, here you can see from retry to circuit breaker to get payment, this method. Okay, scenario 1, circuit breaker triggers fallback and returns a dummy response. Suppose the scenario 1 is the successful case, this like this, like we in the retry we have fallback method and circuit breaker, here you can see it is not having a fallback method. Okay, okay, this is not the scenarios. Here circuit breaker is triggering the fallback. Okay, so the fallback method is at this level, actually not like this, it is like this. The first scenario which is here is something like this. Okay, so the scenario is, you can see circuit breaker triggers fallback and returns dummy response. In this case, since fallback is, you can see it is returning dummy response, and suppose if our this payment service is not down and user service is up and running, let me show you. Okay, while it is running, let's understand. Circuit breaker triggers fallback and returns dummy response. You can see get payment fails. Circuit breaker handles the exception. Since circuit breaker has no fallback method defined, it throws exception upward and retry to catches this. Okay, this is not the scenario actually, because we have circuit breaker is having fallback method. First let me execute it just to show you. This is the second case. This is a different case actually. We have fallback method here in the circuit breaker. Okay, so if we have circuit breaker, let me just execute it. Payment service is down. Okay, so you can see user service fallback triggered, payment service is down. Payment service is down and this fallback method is triggered, and you can see there is no retry logs. Okay, no retry method, no retry is called. You can see something like this retry attempt, this logging is not there. Okay, retry attempt this, so retry is not triggered. EOP does not triggered it. Okay, so this is the normal case, fallback is triggered. So what happens in this scenario? Let me go down. Actually, this is not our scenario. Our scenario is different one. Our scenario is not like this. We have this one, right? No, no, not this one. We have fallback method is circuit breaker. Okay, this is our scenario. Okay, circuit breaker. You can see fallback method is on the with the circuit breaker. So this is our scenario. Now let's see what is happening. Nice. So you can see now this is real tricky configuration and very important for interviews. You updated setup to like this. Okay, so what is the execution order here? From retry to circuit breaker, then get payment method, which is clear. From retry to circuit breaker, then get payment. Cool. Now first execution order, very important. You can see spring AOP applies retry circuit breaker get payment. So retry, you can see circuit breaker with fallback, we have a fallback method and then get payment. Okay, so since here you can see we have retry is not triggered, right? Why? Let's see here. You can see fallback is triggered, but inside fallback method this log is here, but retry didn't happen, right? So let's see. Circuit breaker fallback returns a dummy response. This is the dummy response. Step by step flow. Get payment throws exception. Okay, because payment service is down. Payment service is down. That's why get payment is basically sending exception or throwing exception. Circuit breaker catches the exception. You can see get payment throws exception. Circuit breaker catches it. Circuit breaker executes payment fallback, which it does execute. Okay, you can see inside this, and the response is also user service fallback triggered, payment service is run, try later. So this scenario is also your fallback returns dummy success response. You can see fallback returns dummy success response. Now observe carefully. From retries perspective, this line is very important. I wanted to show this only. From retries perspective, it received a success response, no exception propagated. Because dummy response is also a response. Retry consider it from the retries perspective, it receives a success response and no exception is triggered. Okay, and retry will not trigger at all. That's why it didn't trigger here. Okay, now retry only here you can see retry will not trigger at all, because retry only retries when an exception is thrown. But here exception handles inside circuit breaker fallback return normal response. Retry thinks everything is fine. So you can see retry triggered, no. Fallback method executed, yes, we have seen it here. And then final response is dummy fallback response. Scenario 2, circuit breaker fallback through exception intentionally. Now let's generate this scenario. Actually this was not working properly in our while we were generating. So now we are preparing fallback to throw exception, right? Let me restart the server while we are doing this. So we are throwing exception, and this is method signature. In the method signature also we are throwing exception. Now see what should happen here. Now this is where retry comes into play. Step by step flow. Get payment fails because payment service is down, so it would there would be exception. Circuit breaker would catch the exception. Circuit breaker calls payment fallback. Okay, circuit breaker would call this fallback method. Okay, and when it will enter into fallback method, you throw exception again, which I did. You can see here I did throw the exception again. Now exception propagates out of circuit breaker. It propagates out of circuit breaker and it reaches to retry. Okay. So now retry sees, oh, exception came. I should retry. So now retry would see that some exception occurred and now it's my time to get in action. So retry behavior, retry will attempt again based on config. Each retry goes through retry, circuit breaker, get payment, fallback, and then exception. So this happens, this exception is propagated back to retry and retry catches it. Okay. After retries exhaust, important thing is retry has no fallback defined. You can see retry have no fallback method here. We have removed it. So final exception is thrown to the caller. So this exception which is being thrown, you can see here this exception, whatever exception would come here only, actually this one, it would be thrown to the caller. So who is calling this method? Fallback method is being called from circuit breaker, then it will reach finally to the retry and the retry will send back to the caller. So the final exception would be thrown back to the caller, and caller is user service, right? And you can see retry triggered, yes, it is saying yes. Fallback executed, yes, every attempt. So retry would happen in every attempt, fallback should happen, but final response would be exception thrown. So let's see if this occurs or not. So we have our service, user service up and running, payment service intentionally we have moved, have it down. Now what we are going to do, we are going to send a request and see if fallback is triggered or not. So you can see here we got some internal server error. This exception is thrown and retry. Okay, connection is refused. Some connection is refused. Undeclared request failed Java deadline undeclared with root cause. So there is some undeclared exception which is there. Okay, so actually what is happening here, only if you can see, this is the exception. Java dot, so this is not catching the exception. I think that's why. Let me do one thing. Let me remove all hyphen control z hyphen java dot run java exception, right? We hope it would handle all the requests. Okay, all the exceptions. Java dot lang exception is in java dot lang package, right? Java dot lang dot exception. Okay, it is inside that. So base class reasonable application. Okay, so now we are expecting that all the exception should be handled here only. So just let me try the configuration again. Starting the server. This exception should match, actually the thrown exception should be declared here in retry exceptions. Only if the exceptions are matching, then retry would try. If it is not matching, then we have to register it here on retry exceptions, and then retry picks the exception and executes the retry. So server is starting. This is actually important configuration part of this retry. Okay, now it is started. Let's see if it is working or not successfully. Awesome, awesome. You can see retry attempt 1, retry attempt 2, retry attempt 3 and 4. Since we have 5 attempts, so after 4, fifth would be, there is logging actually, that's why it would show some logs. Okay, now it failed and it throws the execution exception. You can see it threw the exception after final failure of retries. Okay, what happened? Just let me explain it clearly. Let's see here. You can see we have declared fallback method here at circuit breaker level, not with retry but with circuit breaker. And what is happening here, inside the fallback we are intentionally throwing exception. This is the different scenario. Like normal scenario was fallback was returning a dummy response and retry was considering it as a successful response, and the retry was not triggering. It was just sitting back and relaxing, right? But now when it sees an exception, when we throw the exception intentionally, retry sees it. Okay, and now it thinks like, okay, now my time is there, I have to retry this request because an exception is thrown and it is failed. So once this request is failed, what I have to do, I have to retry again from for the payment service response. So from user service it is going to retry. Okay, it is going to retry this particular response and it will wait for response. Now look what is happening here. If you see, now it is working as expected, right? What happens in this scenario, circuit breaker throws exception intensely, get payment fails, it failed. Okay, then circuit breaker catches it, circuit breaker calls the payment fallback, and fallback throws exception because we have made the exception, we have thrown the exception. Now exception propagates out of the circuit breaker. Oh, exception time, retry क्या से देखता है now. Oh, exception time, I should retry. Now retry behavior, retry will attempt again based on the config. Each retry goes through retry, circuit breaker, get payment, fallback, exception, right? So these things are there, and after retry exhaust, important thing is, suppose here since exception is propagated back to retry, and in the retry we do not have any fallback method here, right? We do not have any fallback method. Then what is happening, the exception is propagated back to the caller, and who is the caller? The client, user service, right? So this exception is again sent back to the caller. But you can see this retry attempt, it retried. Okay, as here each retry goes through this one and retry triggered. So here you can see behavior is, you can see retry triggered, yes, fallback executed every attempt. You can see multiple attempts, right? Fallback executed, and each attempt you can see attempt 1 then fallback, attempt 2 then fallback, attempt 3 fallback, right? At every attempt fallback is triggered. Final response, exception thrown. So we can see in the logs exception is thrown, the same exception is thrown back. Now let's see if we have a fallback method here also, right? In the retry here, just let me have this one, payment fallback. Instead of this, let me write a one fallback method just without exception. Okay. Okay, so here what we can see, retry fallback, retry fallback method. Okay. System is little bit slow, it's okay. and we can make it as retry for that. Okay, so we have retry fallback, and here we can see we can return retry happening, retry happening. So this is the successful response for retry. Actually, this is the retry fallback. So just let me give a fallback method also here when circuit breaker is failing. Actually, fallback method is throwing an exception. Then what would happen in this scenario? Exception would reach from circuit breaker to retry. Okay, and then there is no fallback method. In the previous case, this was happening, the exception was thrown back to the caller. But if we have fallback method, then what should happen? Retry, after this getting this exception, retry should trigger this fallback method, right? So just let me start the server. Let's see this scenario also, because very insightful and very interesting scenarios we are dealing with. Okay, so here you can see where key insight is interview gold. Where fallback is placed changes everything. Look at this case A, a fallback at retry level, retry handle failure, retries, then fallback. Okay, case B, fallback at circuit breaker level, then circuit breaker handles failure fast. So if fallback succeeds, retry never runs. If fallback fails, retry kicks in. One liner to remember: if fallback hides exception, retry won't run. If fallback throws exception, retry will run. Real world scenario: avoid putting fallback at circuit breaker when also using retry. So this is the standard practice while using both annotations at the circuit breaker and retry. Then what we should do? We should go with fallback at retry level, and circuit breaker should be without fallback. Okay, retry should control retries plus fallback, and circuit breaker should only focus on its open close states, right? Just like this one, these are the different states. Okay, cool. For these circuit breaker states, you can go to the circuit breaker videos. I have explained it well there. Okay, now let's see if retry fallback is triggered or not. After everything, what should happen in this case? uh, Here you can see first fallback first payment service is down, so exception would be thrown, and that would be cached by circuit breaker. Circuit breaker will try to we understand like payment service is down, this payment service, there's no response coming, then it will trigger the fallback method. But when it enter to the fallback, it is seeing an exception, it is throwing an exception, so it will pop up to the retry level. Okay, so retry will catch the exception and it will see, oh, exception came, then I have to retry it. So every time it will retry and fallback method would be triggered. Okay, that was happening. Now let's see if and that was the scenario when fallback was not there here. Okay, on the retry level, so exception was thrown propagated back to the caller. Now let's see if fallback is there, then exception is thrown or propagated back to the caller or not. Okay, just the same scenario. 1 2 3 start. Now let's see the logs. You can see retry is happening, retry obtained, then fallback just as usual in the previous case. Now once retry is happening, fallback should be triggered, right? Failure after retries, final failure after retries. Actually this is coming from this one only. From this method you can see it first it retried, everything was success, means it retried, but again there was no success because payment service was down. Okay, so this line not get triggered, it triggered this error line, final failure after retries, because the payment service we did not make it up and running while this was executing. Okay, and see, look at this line, retry fallback method. So what happened, the exception is not triggered this time, and what happened, the normal fallback method at you can see here, not rate limiter, it should be retry. So retry fallback method is triggered, and that is what we were expecting. So this was very interesting scenarios. I wanted to discuss what would happen if different fallback is placed at different places and different levels, like retry, if fallback is present, if fallback is not present. This kind of combination permutations I wanted to discuss. That's all, guys. Have a great day, and remember it for your coming interviews. Okay.